Hello, and welcome to the Campus Technology Insider Podcast. I'm Rhea Kelly, Editor-in-Chief of Campus Technology and your host. And I'm here with Tirumala Chimpiri from Stony Brook University to talk about a new framework for examining how insight, decision-making, and execution connect across ERP environments. Tirumala, welcome to the podcast. Let's start. Could you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Rhea. I am Tirumala Rao Chimpiri. I work in enterprise applications and integrations at Stony Brook University. My broader professional work has focused on ERP modernization, enterprise systems integration, automation, and digital transformation. I have over 26 years of IT experience, most of into ERP environments across human resource management, financials, and enterprise performance. My experience has also crossed several industries, including higher education, public health, banking and financial services, manufacturing, HR services, telecommunications, and transportations and logistics. Across those environments, one pattern become very clear to me. Organizations often invest heavily in enterprise platform analytics, automation, and integrations. Now, recently AI capabilities as well. But even when they have strong systems and useful insights, they can still struggle to translate those insights into timely decisions and coordinated execution. That recurring pattern is what led to me developed the CAIP-HE reference framework, which can we talk later in detail. At very high level, my work focus on how organization connect insight, decision making, and execution across complex ERP centered environments.
So can you walk me through what exactly is the CAIP-HE framework and what does it encompass?
Yes, absolutely. At very high level, CAIP-HE is a platform agnostic reference framework I developed to help leaders think about how intelligence should move across ERP centered enterprise environments. So the name stands for four interdependent dimensions: cognitive automation, advanced analytics, integration, and interoperability. And the last one is personalization. The basic idea is that most organizations already have many of these capabilities. They have ERP platforms, analytical tools, dashboards, automation, integration, and user facing experiences. But these capabilities often operate separately, siloed. Analytics may generate insight, automation may improve one workflow, integration may move data between systems, and personalization may tailor information to a particular user. The problem is that if those pieces are not connected as a system, the organization may still struggle to move from insight to decision to execution. So, the framework asks a structural question: are these capabilities working together in a way that helps the organization turn intelligence into coordinated action? It is also important to say what CAIP-HE is not. It is not a product, it is not a software platform, and it's not a implementation methodology. Organizations do not install CAIP-HE. They use it as a leadership lens or evaluative framework to assess ERP modernization, AI initiatives, governance, operating models, and decision flow. For higher education CIOs, this is especially relevant because campuses are complex enterprise environments. A single issue may touch student systems, finance, HR, CRM, learning platforms, and advising. CAIP-HE gives leaders a shared language to ask, Where does insight originate? Who owns the decision? How does that decision move into execution? And where are we still relying on manual coordination or informal workarounds?
So you were trying to solve kind of a gap between the insights that are arising in data and being able to translate that into decision making. Is that
Yes,
right?
that is correct.
So can you give a practical example of how that gap kind of shows up in higher education? What does it look like?
So that's a great question, right? The main problem is the gap between knowing something and acting on it. So across industries, organizations have invested heavily in ERP platform, analytics, automation, and now AI capabilities. But many still struggle with a very practical question. Once the insights appears, how does it become a decision, and how does that decision become coordinated execution? That is the problem CAIP-HE is designed to examine. In higher education, the gap can appear in areas like student success, finance operation, workforce planning, compliance, and institutional planning. A signal may appear in one system, but the decision and execution may depend on several teams, workflows, and governance structures. If those steps are unclear, the institution may have strong analytics but struggle with execution. So the frameworks help leaders to ask a practical question: are we only generating more insight, or are we improving how the institution acts on that insight?
How do you recommend the institutions sort of set out to apply the framework?
So I would suggest starting a small and practical. Institutions do not need to begin with an enterprise-wide redesign. A good starting point is to identify a few high-impact scenarios where insight already exists but action is delayed, inconsistent, or too much depending on manual follow-up. For example, pick a student success scenario, a finance operation scenario, or workforce planning scenario. Then map it from the beginning to end. The questions I would ask are: where does the insight originate? Who receives it? Who owns the decision? What workflow carries the decision forward? Which systems need to be connected? How is accountability maintained? Once leaders map that flow, the gaps usually become very easily visible. The solution may not require a new system. Sometimes it may involve clarifying ownership, improving integration, fixing a workflow, or sometimes strengthening the governance. So the practical value is that the CIP framework helps institution move from a broad technology conversation to a specific operational conversation.
So, especially right now, I think there's a lot of talk about how AI can help sort of streamline decision making, it can help gather or integrate insights from a lot of different sources. So, how is this framework different from just adding AI tools, for example, into ERP or student systems?
That's an important distinction. AI is important, but AI by itself does not solve the decision flow problem. So AI can improve how institutions generate insight. It can identify patterns easier, summarize information, recommend action, or surface risk. But it does not automatically define who owns the decision, how the decision should be executed, or how accountability should be maintained. In some cases, AI actually makes the gap more visible. Institutions may suddenly have more signals, more alerts, and more recommendations, but if there is no structure for acting on them, the organization can become overwhelmed. This is why I think institutions need to think about AI and ERP together with governance workflow integration, and decision ownership. The question is not just can AI generate a better insight? The bigger question is can the institution act on that insight in a clear, timely, and accountable way? So that is where the CAIP-HE fits in. It helps leaders to evaluate whether AI-enabled insight is connected to institutional action.
That's so interesting. So it really just it comes down ultimately to the people making the decisions. So yeah, that brings up governance, of course. So can you talk more about how, like, do institutions need to be reevaluating their governance processes, in light of um, these gaps that you're seeing?
Yeah. So I feel like governance is the central to this because in many institutions governance is often thought of as approval, oversight, or compliance. Those are important, but AI-enabled ERP environments governance is also needs to be connected to how decision actually move through the institution. For example, if an analytics tool identifies a student at risk, so the questions right ask who has the authority to act. If an automated workflow recommends an intervention, when does a human review it? Or if a financial signal triggers a response, who is accountable for the decision and the how to follow through? So governance should help answer those questions before problems occur, not only after something goes wrong. I think governance needs to be become more flow aware. It should clearly decision rights, escalation paths, transparency, and a human oversight. This is especially important in higher education because decisions can affect student access, student success, financial outcome, compliance, and equity. So institution needs to move faster, but they also need to maintain trust and accountability.
What mistakes do institutions often make when they're modernizing ERP or adopting AI?
One mistake I see often is treating each capability as a separate project. For example, analytics become one initiative, automation becomes another, integration becomes another, AI becomes another, right? And also personalization becomes another. Each may deliver value locally, but the institution may still struggle if those efforts are not connected. Another mistake is assuming that better insight automatically leads to better action. In reality, insight has to travel through people, process, systems, and governance structures. A third mistake is focusing too much on go live or tool deployment and not enough on what happens afterward. The question should not only be did we implement the system, rather it should be are we making better decisions, reducing manual workarounds, improving coordination, and creating more reliable execution. That's why I keep coming back to the phrase insight to decision to execution. So in that flow, if the flow is not clear, modernization can fall short even when the technology itself is strong.
In a way, it sounds like closing that gap between the insights and the execution is really a way of better ensuring ROI on these massive investments.
Yeah, that is correct.
So, what would you say that CIOs or institutional leaders should remember from our conversation here and the framework in general?
So the main thing I would want CEOs and institutional leaders to remember is that more intelligence does not automatically create better outcomes. AI, analytics, ERP modernization, and automation all matters, but their value depends on whether they are connected to decision making, workflow, governance, and execution. CAIP-HE is meant to help leaders to examine that connection. It encourages institutions to look at cognitive automation, advanced analytics, integration and interoperability, and personalization as connected capabilities rather than separate efforts. For higher education CIOs, the opportunity is to move beyond systems of record and towards systems that help people understand, decide, and act more effectively. So that is the future I think institutions should work towards, not just more data, not just more AI, but clear decision pathways and more accountable execution.
I really like that. Not just more data or more AI, but actual decisions that make a difference.
Yes, that is correct.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Rhea, for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Rhea Kelly, and this was the Campus Technology Insider Podcast. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms or visit us online at campustechnology.com/podcast. Let us know what you think of this episode and what you'd like to hear in the future. Until next time.